now.
Stay home for Labour, isolate solidarity. Let's get together on Zoom, see into people's bedrooms. We're all voyeurs for free. Stay home for Labour, with Crispin as your MC. Get used to the smell of your fragrant hand gel, hands like an ancient mummy. I said stay home for Labour, wave your toilet rolls in the air real quick. Have a laugh, have a sup, keep your spirits up, cause when this is all over, we've got some asses to kick. I said stay home for Labour.
This is now a humanitarian disaster which is creeping right across the country and into millions of households. Also, we know the furlough scheme will eventually start getting wound down. That's going to be a huge issue, an absolutely huge issue. So we can't rely on people like all the good people on here, all the good people in the communities. You just can't rely on councils who've been cut to the bone. It ain't going to work. You can't rely on like a Victorian style, people were going out and donating, because it just won't work. It's become such an endemic structural problem in this country. Food poverty is going to be one of the big things over the next 6 to 8 weeks for so many people across this country. And we've got millions of people now. I think the Trussell Trust have just said 81% usage up from last year. We've got hundreds of thousands of children who haven't accessed the school vouchers. So where do we go as a Labour Party? What do we call for?
And we've got a really important discussion today following last week's show. We're going to be talking about what we can do to address the crisis that is already here with food banks unable to cope almost with demand, and the potential for further demand coming with the furloughing ending. And I'd just like to speak, first of all, to Ian Byrne, who's finished off our little intro there. Ian, are you there?
Yeah, me and Crispin, nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Yeah, I thought that was a very concise point that you made about how this situation is really escalating and could become, within, you said, 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, when do you expect the furlough thing to end and this problem of food poverty to really hit the wall?
Well, I think the Chancellor's laid out his path, hasn't he, how the furlough's going to unwind. But I think we're seeing more and more people. I think John Reynolds just put something out today in the press. 250,000 people who applied for universal credit in March have not received a payment yet. So them 250,000 people, have they accessed any funds? No, we just don't know their situation. The Trussell Trust released their figures on, I think it was Thursday, 89% increase in April this year from April last year. And we're just seeing these sorts of figures rolled out on a weekly basis, which should terrify us all. And as I said, that's before the end of the furlough scheme. So I think the question what I did ask, and it'll be interesting, the guests and the people who we've got, what do we do as a society? Where do we go? Because this is systemic. You know, I know the Trussell Trust have joined up with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and they're looking at an emergency income support scheme during COVID. But I think we've also got to be discussing today, what do we do after COVID for our communities that potentially going to be ravaged by unemployment and other fallout from this crisis? So I've got my ideas. I'll be happy to share them, and then hopefully other ideas will come to the fore. But I think as a Labour Party, we've got 500,000 members. Them 500,000 members can play an integral part in helping our communities who are struggling at the moment. And that's something I'd like to see moving forward, is how we utilise the expertise, what we've got within the membership base, to really embed itself in the community and look at tackling this issue.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I agree that the Labour Party has a big role to play in this. We might not be in government, but we can provide an opposition that can really put this issue out there. I mean, that's what we can do, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah, and you know, and Jeremy's on the call, and you look at the 2019 manifesto, and every week that passes by, it's like Nostradamus has wrote it, because everything in it would have been exactly what we need at the moment. You know, and within the manifesto, we were going to enshrine in law the right to food. Now that's something which we, as a Labour Party, was just a magnificent development, and all the other facets of that policy, including the Food Commissioner and other things like going into the community, looking at food unions, community cafes, allotments. There was a structure within that policy which is what we're all asking for now, and that's something I'm keen to build on in Liverpool West Derby. Is basically what was in the manifesto, and I think it was so enlightened and ahead of its time. And as I say, now I can't emphasise enough. I'd say to all Labour Party members, go back and read the manifesto and realise what was in there that would have really aided our communities at the moment. But yeah, that part of it is something we should be using and building on.
Jeremy, we're just talking about the manifesto. I mean, obviously you were part of the main person behind that. You said in a conversation we had that you've seen lots of evidence of food poverty in your constituency on top of everything else.
Yes, thanks, Crispin, and thanks for hosting this call, and also for all that you do in giving us the space and facility to have these kind of discussions and debates. So we all owe you a very big debt of thanks for that and many other things that you've done to mobilise and entertain us. And don't forget that if we don't get together, then we don't understand what each other want, and therefore we're all weaker as a result of it. So these calls are very, very important. I represent Islington North, as you know, and if you ask anyone outside Islington what's their impression of Islington, they would say it's wealthy, it's cappuccino society, it's bistros and all that. Yeah, we've got all of that, but in my constituency, 40% of the children are living in poverty, which would be probably broadly similar in many other Labour constituencies around the country. And it has a very large working class community like everywhere else that is suffering a great deal. I've been helping in all of the food hubs that we've got. What we've done in my borough is the council has provided space at a leisure centre, which is closed obviously for lockdown, and that's the food centre where big donations of food are delivered to it and then parcelled up and delivered by council van or volunteers vans to each of the food hubs, which work on a rotation daily basis, delivering usually weekly supplies of food to people that desperately need them. In some cases, they no longer need them. In other cases, they need it even more desperately. Also, a lot of new people coming on. And I've been doing some of the food deliveries as well. And there are people who are in receipt of these food bags and stuff that we take around who never ever thought they'd be asking for anything in their lives, never thought they would be in a position of being food insecure. And yet they are. And some people are deeply embarrassed by this. They shouldn't be. It's a situation not of their making, they're victims of it. So on the plus side, I would say that certainly in experience of my own community has been an incredible upsurge of volunteers, from millennials to pensioners, from people from all communities, obviously women and men working there together and doing an incredible job. And it does mean that even in an area like mine, where there's a big transient community, I mean, in the ward in which I live, there's a population turnover of 25-30% a year. And so building that sense of community is obviously difficult because of that. But what we've got from this is that great sense of we're doing stuff as a community together. Now, obviously, food banks and food parcels are something that have grown massively in this country, particularly in the past 10 years. And they've almost become institutionalized. So we have this sort of, I find it still weird, that you go into a supermarket and you finished your shopping and you're then invited to give a donation to the food bank, which will then be badged on behalf of the supermarket and delivered to them like they're doing a good job. Well, obviously getting food to people is essential, but we've got to look at the reasons for that food poverty. The reasons, low wages. The reasons, universal credit. And I met somebody last week who's only just received the first universal credit payment, and they applied for it when they were furloughed, or rather lost their job as a result of the corona crisis, self-employed person. And so the levels of need are huge, but it's also about the longer term, because over the years we've built up a whole system where there are school breakfasts, there are free school lunches, and that's absolutely right. And what I was proud of in our manifesto was that we would introduce free lunches for all primary school children all over the country, eaten together, which is a good sense of understanding and community. We'd also introduce school breakfasts, and that we would also introduce a food security system, because Ian is quite right that there are many people who are systemically short of food because of their income levels, and the number of parents who will privately admit that they themselves have gone without food quite often in order to make sure their children are fed. Sorry, this is the 21st century Britain, fifth richest country in the world. It's an utter disgrace. And the government has just announced it's not going to support holiday hunger schemes going through in August. And so when the school holiday season begins at the end of July, that degree of poverty will be increased as a result of it. So what do we do? First of all, as a party, and Ian's quite right about this, we're a community-based party, we should obviously be involved fully in all of this, but we also have to be one that's demanding of the government that it provides sufficient food for people. And that's why I proposed an amendment to the coronavirus bill when it came up, which was that the government should have a legal responsibility to make sure everybody is fed. It's actually in the UN Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 that everyone should have access to food. And so we have to make those demands, and make the big demand that at the end of corona crisis, we don't do what we did in 2008, 9, 10, particularly 2010 onwards, when a program of austerity, of cuts, has actually led to greater poverty and greater wealth amongst a very small minority, and greater inequality in our society. This has got to be where we frame the agenda for an investment-led future for our society. There are also issues of food security globally as well. We import quite a lot of our food. We could and should grow much more within our society, and that's why we had a quite big section in the manifesto on food security for the future. And I think this means that we have to invest in sustainable agriculture, suburban and urban agriculture as well, where you can grow quite a lot of early vegetables and salad crops, and we could become much more sustainable food-wise, with healthy food grown in a sustainable way. And that also means that environmental issues have to be addressed at the same time. All of these things come together. The one big lesson of the corona crisis has been this, that everything we said in the manifesto in November and December was that we wanted to invest money in the future. We wanted a whole benefits and welfare system that ensured that nobody ever fell into hunger, poverty, or destitution in our society, and certainly nobody should ever be forced to sleep rough on the streets of this country. I was condemned. All of our candidates were condemned. All our leading spokespersons from the shadow cabinet were all condemned. You're spending too much money. It's unaffordable. It'll crash the economy. You remember it all very well. And every single newspaper, with the exception of the Morning Star, retailed that particular description put against us by our enemies. 3 months later, the government was spending all the money that I had said should have been invested in the economy. Suddenly they found the money because they realized just how vulnerable our society and our community is after 10 years of austerity. So let's get that message home, that community matters, local government matters, public health matters, and our National Health Service should not be privatised, diced up, sliced up and carved up, should be a unified, publicly owned and publicly run National Health Service and care sector as well. Those have got to be the lessons from this crisis. So let's not just look forward to the end of COVID. Obviously, we all do that, but make sure we are there forming and framing and demanding in that debate, because look at our history as a movement. Those people that in the 1930s argued against the means test, argued against the end of universalism. Well, there never was universalism at that time, really, but argued for universal delivery of support and benefits for all. They had a hard time in the 1930s. People died from poverty. The only time they got to eat properly was during the Second World War, when there was food rationing. But it was a Labour government after the war that brought in the whole principles of a welfare state. Well, some of those issues need updating, but the principle of a society that cares for all and leaves no one behind is surely the core of what we as socialists believe in.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Will you stay behind to listen to the other people who've come in to contribute? Because I wanted.
I've got some other stuff to do, but thanks very much. And by the way, Zoom is a brilliant way of communicating with people.
You're going off, are you?
No, not yet. I'm listening.
Oh, we won't be. We won't. Anyway, what I wanted to do.
Come on, Ian, look at me. Look at me.
What I wanted to do was bring in Billy. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Billy, Jeremy, Billy put on a clip from his food bank that he runs in Elephant and Castle that showed a massive queue of people that got my attention. And then since then, we've just found that there's so many people who are struggling with food poverty that isn't being publicised out there. But Billy made a big film about this and made a lot of noise about it. Billy, what do you think about what Jeremy was saying about the manifesto? I mean, do you think that...
I think, oh no, listen, I agree with him. But what I have to add is the community is so important for independent food banks, like IFAN, the Independent Food Bank Network, and that's run by Sabine Goodwin, where these local food banks are so important because they know the families that the local authorities don't know, you know, and the local independent food banks, they actually have partnerships with various smaller charities that are not on a map, like Dad's House. I mean, we're a tiny charity, you know, but we're lucky that we've got phenomenal partnerships. As an example, with Solidarity Sports, who they know the community, but they know a different part of the community where we can reach out to. So different charities can come into the food banks and get more support for different families, you know. And what we did with the film, with the video, if I told someone we had 600 people queuing for our food bank, no one would believe me. I know that for a fact because I did tell people and they were like, no. But once they seen the families queuing, it was a different story. It was heartbreaking. And that happens on a daily basis. But all that is in line with people waiting for universal credit, people who have lost their jobs, self-employed, the nannies, the cleaners, the cooks, who got sacked instantly. You know, they didn't get furloughed, and I keep saying that, and I have to get the message across that these people have nothing. And what I said earlier, where now the councils are looking at what can we do to help these smaller independent food banks that know the community that we don't know, that members of the community would never go to the local authority in their lifetime because A, there's too much bureaucracy and they're scared or they're embarrassed, you know, and pride is a huge thing. But when they come to Dad's House, you know what? They walk through that door and the warmth that we give, that we hope to give, is, I think, pretty phenomenal. you know. So I agree with everything Jeremy says, and also with what Ian said earlier as well with the Trussell Trust. The actual figures on food bank usage is right through the roof. And again, I have to mention IFAN. I mean, they do so much, but again, they're a smaller version of what we do, you know, but yet they speak for everyone. And they have a voice for people like myself, who we've just got funded this week.
Yeah. So are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Billy. Look, I'm going to move on to Pauline Town. Are you there, Pauline?
Hi, yes, I'm here, Crispin.
Can you? I can't see you yet, Pauline.
I'm here. Can you?
Oh, I can see you now. Right. So, Pauline, you run it's like a food bank, but also you feed the homeless at the same time. What's your feeling about the way that the system works with referrals? Because it seems to me that there's a lot of people who are not given referrals by the department of whatever they are now called, and it means that you have to fill in the gaps. Is that one of the main problems we've got at the moment?
I think very much so, yeah. I mean, the group that I'm part of is called We Shall Overcome. We're nationally in the community, in our own community. So I work as We Shall Overcome Ashton, but we're right around the country and have been for the last 6 years. And it's something that all the groups that I'm speaking to that are part of our sort of We Shall Overcome family are saying the same thing. What's making it even worse is that to access a referral form for a food bank, you have to go to your local GP or to Citizens Advice or to the council or to Housing Advice. All these offices are actually shut at the moment. So we've got people that just don't know where to turn to get the referral vouchers when they have been able to go there before. And it's all a little bit chaotic at the minute, finding where you can get a referral. Then people are worried, well, you're only allowed so many of those. It can be embarrassing to keep going through your situation. So I think, like Billy was saying, very importantly then, it's the reception that you get when you come to the door, and a lot of the smaller independent food banks, you can self-refer and you can go and get that help. I mean, I've got people turn up here that haven't eaten for 3 days and then try to eat so quickly that they're vomiting. We shouldn't be dealing with that in 2020 in the UK. But I have key workers today. I was a little bit late joining because I've got a key worker who's got a very vulnerable lady, can't access any help for us after the weekend, and she's not eaten for 2 days because the universal credit didn't arrive. So she's already 2 days into no food, and I've had to go and make her food parcels to be picked up to just see her through till after the weekend. So there's so many gaps where people don't know where to turn for help. And I think the communities are all coming together and filling those gaps in. But very much so, it is the community groups and the smaller charities. And like Billy's got that queue outside Dad's house. We have a queue outside. I'm running from a pub that's shut under the crisis. And I have a queue to the end of the street each day for people coming for a packed lunch. If we don't do this, those people just don't eat. And it is going to get worse. And what terrifies me is what Jeremy was saying. Assuming we're going to get to the end of this crisis, and hopefully that, we don't know how long it's going to be, if what we then get is that we're battered by austerity again, that's what's caused the problem that's taken us into this crisis so weak in the first place. These people are not going to survive, and I've genuinely got people coming who are on medication that they need to eat with, that the mental health is suffering because they've not eaten for 3 days. People that are coming that as soon as you give them, the food parcel, they're bringing the kids with them and feeding the kids outside my pub. And it's heartbreaking. But this level of food poverty, I think people are starting to see that it's there. Had we had the success at the election and what was in the manifesto, it was always going to be something to at least work from, and that we could build upon. What we've got at the minute are no foundations there to take care of these people in the first place, so the situation's spiralling. And obviously we're in uncharted territory with this crisis. I don't envy anybody who has to come up with the strategies for how to deal with it, but the fact that people are going 4 days without food and don't know where to turn. That's indicative that we went into this with a level of food poverty already that was unacceptable, and it's getting out of control, and it's getting out of control really quickly.
Well, thank you, Pauline. I'm just going to bring in Julie in Cumbria, who was going to speak on last week's show, but she had a power cut just before it started, so I thought I'd give her another chance.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Julie.
Hi.
So tell us what your experience is at the moment in Cumbria, in a rural part of the country.
Just the same as what everybody else is going through. I think, again, with what Jeremy said, people think that Cumbria, following on from what Jeremy said about his constituency, people think Cumbria is, the Lake District, somewhere where people come on holiday, quite affluent. We've got some of the most deprived communities in the country. There's about 6 that are in the top 5% of the indices of deprivation. And we also are accessing kind of food through food banks, fair share, etc. But what we're conscious of is moving forward, what happens when the food starts to dry up through the fair share movement and food banks, because we believe it is genuinely going to happen.
You think the food's going to dry up?
Well, I'm involved with the fair share movement within the Northwest, and you can already see this, and we're aware that there has been a lot more food coming into the system because there was a lot of food stockpiled when the government thought there would be a no-deal Brexit. So a lot of the food that's come into the system is what has been stockpiled.
All right. And so what's your feeling about how we could resolve this situation in the short term?
Obviously, with a big rural area, we're aware that a lot of farmers and wholesalers do have a lot of food waste. So what we are going to be doing is we're working on a couple of pilot areas to trial a project whereby we cut out the middleman, basically. So we link suppliers and wholesalers with deprived communities. We build up a volunteer base within these communities, and we get people good quality, healthy food at affordable prices. We're also aware that I know a local farmer who grows potatoes, and about 40% of the potatoes that he grows goes back into the soil because he can't sell them. So it's making sure that we don't have that kind of food waste. We're also in one area, a really deprived community in the south of West Cumbria, Milham they call it. We're piloting a local allotment scheme whereby, and not only allotment, turning over areas of open space to plant and grow programmes. And we've got a training scheme set up whereby people who've never grown their own produce before will be buddied up with an experienced gardener, and they'll be encouraged to grow their own produce. And then what we're going to look at is setting up like a farmers market project where people alongside suppliers can sell their own produce if they've got an oversupply. But alongside that, we're setting up social inclusion hubs from which anybody needing any support will be assisted, because we've got Citizens Advice Bureau, credit union, housing associations, ourselves involved in supporting these hubs.
So it's sort of, you think it's time to change the way that we try and tackle this by going for almost like back to the farms and back to the beginning of where we get the food, rather than trying to get these tins from supermarkets and stuff like that?
Well, often you find that suppliers are strangled by the supermarkets that have keeping kind of how much they charge them really low. So they can afford to, say, take a 4-stone bag of potatoes and sell it for £8. And if you look at how much it costs you to buy 6 or 7 potatoes from a supermarket, they can split them and probably sell them for 30, 40 pence to a community group, right, to individuals of a community group.
But I just saw Jeremy wants to get in. What do you want to say, Jeremy?
Just very, very briefly, Julie, thanks for what you said, and also fantastic work that you and others do all across Cumbria. And you're quite right. Cumbria is always presented as the Lake District and Kendal, and forgets about all the poverty along the coast and all of those towns there. I think your point about farmers and food growing is important, because the supermarkets, because of their very picky policy about what kind of vegetables or fruit they will sell, are actually one of the main causes of a terrible amount of food waste. And there's nothing more ridiculous than growing potatoes to plough them back in the ground in order for somebody to keep a price up somewhere else while people are going hungry. So I do think that local production and local enterprise is important. Allotments are very important for people to grow their own where they can, although in big urban areas it's not easy to provide allotment space. But urban growing is actually a possibility. During the worst time of the blockade of Cuba, they decided to try and make Havana self-sufficient in fruit and vegetables. And it pretty well worked. They just grew stuff wherever they could, and people were encouraged to do so. And it was probably better food than imported food they would have got. So I do think we're absolutely onto something there. And it's up to us as very active Labour parties in our area to look at these things and look at people being encouraged to grow their own, as well as challenging the power, the monopoly power of supermarkets, which are something that has to be challenged, which is why I was very keen to put this whole food strategy into our manifesto. And of course, growing more of our own means there's less transport and less pollution as a result of it. The Food Miles campaign is an important part of it as well. So well done, you.
Thank you very much.
Julie, I'm just going to move on to, thank you, Julie, as well. Sorry, I'm just wanted to get Pete in. He's from the National Food Service. You there, Pete?
Hiya. How you doing?
I'm good. So you've got a similar kind of outlook in that you think it's the quality of food as well that's important. Mm-hmm. That it's not just about giving people anything to fill their stomachs, but it's actually quality. Yeah.
It's quality. Food needs to be, I think, a holistic approach. It's coupled with issues like housing, employment. All of these things come hand in hand. We can end kind of food insecurity and housing problems today. We've got the resources to do that. Part of that is through creating social spaces for equality where we can eat and share together. That's, I think, fundamental for communities to be able to grow and become more resilient. I'm representing the kind of the national campaign in this, but locally in our response to COVID, we've distributed 20,000 meals for free. It's solidarity, it's not charity. And that's really important because it allows our recipients to come back into the fold and be a part of the project in growing kind of how we deal with food crisis. Like lots of our kind of volunteers have come from the back of, actually, we've helped you, we can help other people, and we grow and we share and we learn together. And that's a fundamental basis of why food is really important. One of the things that we really want to see is a more entwined kind of movement between food and our workers, trade union movement. If we can build it through that, it means that, Tory governments can't take them away in the future. We create food security for ourselves and our communities. Food banks do great jobs, but they're a band-aid. Charities are a band-aid over social problems. And we need to think about more sustainable long-term routes where we can plug holes for good and not kind of having to kind of stick bandages over things. So our answer to that is to create these spaces. It's communal eating, it's community centres on every road where we can come together as communities and cook and share and talk and work out issues. The way we've been doing that in Bristol is, that's where I live, is we've been working on the ground with community groups. So we didn't want to go in over the top, but we wanted to work with community groups in tandem. So we're distributing meals through hubs, individually through our referral line, and they're free. They're free at the point of service. If people want to chip in and help out, they can. If they're in that much poverty, they can't. We get probably 2 or 3 people a day coming back to us saying, I haven't eaten in weeks. And they go, can we get food? We don't ask questions. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a delivery out for you that day. We deliver three fresh meals that are frozen straight to your door with a loaf of bread and some pudding, because there needs to be a bit of pride in food. They're all cooked by local community cafes. They're cooked by our chefs. And it's been horrible, but wonderful to see at the same time. The amount of people that have come back and gone, actually, this is amazing. Thank you. You've given us kind of a little bit of hope. I can worry about the other things, not when I'm eating next. And we can take away that level of stress. And that's really important because it means our communities can come back and fight against austerity. They can fight for the things that they need in their communities. They can help pay their bills because we take away. The government is about to cut free school meals over the 6-week holidays in the midst of the biggest pandemic in the world and the biggest recession we're about to see ever. And kids are going to starve in the next 6 weeks. The government is callous. Like, Jeremy, come and have a chat with us at the campaign because we'd really like your support behind it. We'd like all of your support behind this because we need a national food service today.
Oh, thank you, Pete. I'm just going to bring in, because you talked about child poverty, food poverty. We had Nicky on the show last week from Birmingham. Are you there, Nicky?
Hi, Crispin. How are you?
I'm good. So, tell us what you. I mean, obviously, with families going short of food, it's like the children are the people who we have to worry about most. I suppose we prioritise. But you're finding in Birmingham that you have to set up a food bank for babies, and
yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think the way out of this is?
I think they definitely need to not cut free school meals for children. When we first started our baby bank, we were helping. It was run out of my spare bedroom, and now we've got our own premises, and it looks like we're going to outgrow that. Our demand just keeps growing and growing. Whilst I've been on this call, we've had 10 referrals come through. So our kind of food bank is specialised for under 5 years old, and it was mainly because the food banks in Birmingham weren't coping with the demand for things like nappies or formula milk or baby food. So we set up and picked up the slack. We cover 10 constituencies. We help with furniture now. We help with clothes because of the changing seasons. And we're also kind of picking up with breakfast cereal and toys for children that are going out without birthday presents and things. For me, it has shown that our welfare system not only fails children, but it punishes them too. We've got a 2-child cap that still exists. Our child benefit rates are not high enough. The fact that the government are even considering cutting free school meals at the moment is absolutely atrocious. We are in this crisis because of austerity, which was a political choice. I think it's quite awful now as well that the Tories are kind of saying to us, oh, you need to rely on community, you need to get your neighbours to do this for you, when they have spent the last God knows how long stripping away our communities to the bare.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicky. I'm just going to bring in Jane from the campaign to. Oh, hold on. What are we doing? Jane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
You're from the Labour Hunger campaign.
Yeah.
Now you've got a set of demands that you think should be met by the government. So, what would you like to tell us about those?
Yeah, I will. I mean, first of all, I just want to come in on what Pauline said. The stories she told us are just appalling, and they're happening throughout the country. I live in what's supposed to be an affluent city. We've seen food bank demand treble here since lockdown. So, this is a crisis that affects everywhere the same, and that's what we're dealing with. What we want to see at the Labour Hunger campaign is what you have to remember, that food poverty is not about a shortage of food, it's about a shortage of money. So if you're going to tackle food poverty, you need to tackle the structural causes of it. And that means making sure that everyone has enough to live on, whether that's by paying people a proper living wage or by making sure that they have genuine social security when they cannot earn. So a lot of our campaign is focused on the benefit system because benefits are now the main driver of food bank use. They have been since 2010. Essentially, 2/3 of food bank use is driven by the 5-week wait and universal credit, problems with benefits, the punitive sanctions regime. This is what's causing a lot of the problems. So we need to turn that around so the welfare state once again becomes something that supports people and saves them from destitution rather than driving them into destitution. So in terms of the current crisis with coronavirus, obviously a lot more people are suddenly having to find themselves reliant on the welfare state. People who didn't expect ever to be in that situation are discovering that where they thought they would get support, they're simply not getting enough to live on. And as usual, the people who are already vulnerable, low-income families, are being hit hardest by coronavirus. So what we want at the Labour Hunger Campaign is immediate cash transfers to people who are struggling to put food on the table. And I've seen a lot of comments come up in the chat about universal basic income. I mean, this is a really interesting idea. It's definitely an idea that needs to be taken very seriously. But what I would say is it's not for now, because we need something that can be implemented immediately, and we don't currently have a system whereby we can pay universal basic income to everyone. So in terms of using the existing mechanisms to support people, the first thing we want to see is an increase in child benefit. We want it increased to £50 per child per week. That will support low-income families, not just those who are eligible for free school meals, but families who are not, on the borderline, not quite eligible. It would support all those families who've been newly impoverished, who are facing job losses and have had a sudden income shock because of coronavirus. So let's increase child benefit. Let's make sure children are not going hungry. The basic level of universal credit, we want to see that increase to £260 a week. That is the amount recommended by the TUC. It represents 80% of the national living wage, that's the government's minimum wage, and 47% of average earnings. So, £260 a week might sound quite generous. It's not, but it's enough. It's enough so that people are not having to rely on food banks in order to eat. We think a really interesting idea, and again, one that could be put into use immediately, is to use the tax system to pay people money. So Rishi Sunak has introduced schemes to support people by furloughing them. He's introduced a certain amount of support for self-employed people. But we know that millions of people are not being helped by those schemes. So what the government could be doing is using, most people are registered on the tax system. You could use that to pay people direct transfers of money. So for example, if you do self-assessment on your tax, if you get it wrong and they owe you a bit of tax back, they can pay that to you immediately through this system. That system could be used now to pay money to people who are not covered by the Chancellor's schemes. We also want to see, we want a guarantee that no one will be left out. So Boris Johnson, famously the other day, didn't know about no recourse to public funds. The fact that some people, because of their immigration status, they have leave to remain, but they have no entitlement to benefits. And that means that their children do not even get free school meals. A lot of people with no recourse to public funds, they are the people who are in those low-paid jobs that we've suddenly realised are the most important jobs in our society. They're the care workers, they're maybe the nurses, they're the people who are driving the buses. A lot of these people are not entitled to benefits. We want the benefit system to be extended for all. Again, that is something that can be done immediately if the political will is there to do it. And then finally,
Carry on.
Finally, going back to the benefit system, we've got to remove the benefit cap. We've got to remove the 2-child limit. We've got to remove the bedroom tax. These measures are there to punish people. There is no other reason for them, and they have no place in a civilised society. So what we're looking at is having a welfare state that is fit for purpose once more. And we think the welfare state should be like the NHS. It should be something that everyone is proud of, because it's a great institution that is there for people when they need it and that treats everyone with respect and with dignity.
Can I just ask you a question? Because we did email before the show. There was an article by the new Shadow Work and Pensions Minister, Jonathan Reynolds, that had caused some controversy. The headline wasn't very good in the article itself. But what's your opinion on Labour's front bench and how they've tackled this crisis?
You mean since coronavirus?
Yeah.
Well, first I'd like to say that the Labour Hunger Campaign was set up to lobby for manifesto pledges on eradicating food poverty from the Labour Party. And we got pretty much everything we wanted in the 2019 manifesto. So, you know, I'm not aware that Labour has moved away from that. In terms of this crisis, I know that the Labour front bench is doing a lot of work behind the scenes, that it's having conversations with its opposite numbers in government. So, you know, I would say that we don't always see what they're doing, but they are working on it. I wish this issue had a higher profile, certainly. I wish everyone was shouting about the fact that people are going hungry.
Well, that seems to me, my gripe with what I'm seeing is there isn't enough being told about this. I mean, look at what happened with coronavirus. We could have maybe done something before it got out of hand. This is the same situation. If we don't actually start flagging it up, then there could be a massive crisis and people could go hungry. And I mean, I'm really quite disappointed by some of the lack of just the lack of statement. Nothing's being said.
I mean, you know, that massive crisis that you just referred to that could happen, that's been happening for 10 years. This is nothing new.
No.
It's been getting worse. Coronavirus has exposed it and it's made it worse. But that's been going on for 10 years. And we've had a government for 10 years that has turned its back willfully on the fact that people are going hungry. And we should all be angry about that and we should all be shouting about it.
Oh, I understand it's been going on for 10 years, but it's just this idea of all the people who've been furloughed becoming unemployed, and then that wave of people all needing help. And it seems from what we've heard on this discussion that the food banks are almost at their peak. They can't even take much more.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just going to go back to Jeremy because. Are you there, Jeremy? I can see your finger.
Yes, I am. Yes, I was just looking at the chat box. Yeah. Okay, if I can get back to it. Yep. Hi, there we are.
So what we've kind of come to the. I've gone through everyone that I've invited to this discussion. What's your feeling about what we can all do now to make sure that the government starts doing stuff, maybe reversing that decision on the children, children not being fed school meals during the summer, or having a.
I think forcing the government to reverse the decision on school meals is something we should concentrate on very, very hard indeed, because it's obviously totemic in the sense that it's an indication of where the direction of travel they're going on. It's also devastating for many families and children in our own communities. So I think focusing on that is very, very important. But taking the points that were made about universal basic income, but also about raising child benefits, universal credit, and ending the two-child policy are also very important. I mean, take it in reverse order. The two-child policy is just cruel, immoral, wrong in every conceivable way. What is it about any society that says, well, the first two children deserve equal treatment, but the third, fourth, fifth, or whatever certainly doesn't? Well, I've seen the hunger that this causes, and it's real hunger that's caused to large families in my own constituency. So let's be honest about it and campaign to get rid of the two-child policy and to increase the levels of child benefit and the rate itself. There's also issues which hasn't been raised this afternoon about housing, particularly in the private rented sector, where supposedly there's no evictions during the period of the coronavirus crisis. Not clear what happens after that, not clear what happens over any rent arrears that we've built up. I think we have to be speaking up for the private rented sector tenants very, very loudly indeed. Taking our own policies forward, I'm interested in universal basic income. And I can see advantages in it, but and this is a big but, it's got to be accompanied by a much higher minimum wage, a real living wage, even above the level of the living wage that we proposed in the election. It's also got to be accompanied by a guarantee and increase expenditure on public services, because you can see how some on the right would promote the idea of a universal basic income as a way of cutting taxation and cutting services in lots of other areas. So I think the idea of a guaranteed living standard for everybody is a very important one, but let's think it through very, very carefully. And I was on a discussion call yesterday from the Cosmos group, and this came up. And this came up a few times, and I think it does need to be a full discussion within our movement so that we take the issue forward and we have some ownership of the debate. Otherwise, others will take it over from the right who will say, well, actually, this is a way to destroy the welfare state and individualise everything, which, of course, is the overall Tory strategy. Our principles have to be that we guarantee everyone in our society enough to eat, somewhere to live, and education, in the same way that the post-war Labour government guaranteed everybody healthcare for the duration of their lives. And the last point, I'm glad somebody brought it up, this issue of no recourse to public funds. Apparently the Prime Minister didn't know there was such a thing happening in our society. Well, I cannot believe there isn't somebody in his constituency that has no recourse to public funds and has to survive somehow. It is utterly outrageous when people are ill, they are living, in many cases they're working, contributing to our society, and then denied access to the benefits that that society brings as a whole. If we believe in universalism, let's practice it. Universalism means everybody.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I just wanted to bring back. Oh, she's not. Jane, who made those points about what we could do. Jane, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Jane, yeah, I just wanted to flag up your website and your campaign. Could you tell people all about it, where we can access all the information that you've got?
Yeah, it's www.labourhunger.co.uk. Later this week, we're launching a campaign on raising child benefit. Details will go on the website then, and that will include a template letter that people can send to their MP asking them to support the rise in child benefit, and it will also include a petition that we're going to put forward. And
I was just thinking, would you come back on the show every so often to update us on what's happening?
Thank you very much. I'd be really happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Great to see you. And now we have come to the end of our discussion on food poverty, but I'm sure we'll come back to it. I mean, I'm just, you know, some of the things almost made me cry. Some of the things I was hearing there, and it's going to be very difficult to move from that to this section of the show. And any comedian who tries to make someone laugh after this would be a very good comedian indeed. And who will I call on as the first comedian to try to raise our spirits? I think I might have to ask you, Don Biswas. Are you there, Don?
Yeah, sorry. Hello, Crispin. Hello, everyone. Great debate.
Do you want to talk about something
today by saying that I think that we should name the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic to No Lives Matter.
Okay.
That's true. It's a great debate, by the way. For example, I agree with some of the stuff. I think we should have free school meals. When I was younger, I had to pay for my school meals. What made it worse was the fact I was homeschooled.
Oh, man.
I can't believe my parents charged me. Also, I agree we should remove the 2-child cap, unless it involves Boris Johnson's children. We don't know how many he has, and we don't want to bankrupt the economy any further. I think one thing we should blame for this is billionaires. Billionaires are to blame. Jeff Bezos donated $100 million to American food banks. You know what would make people less hungry? If Jeff Bezos actually paid his taxes. That's why one reason why I don't use Amazon Prime is because Jeff doesn't pay his taxes. Another reason why I boycotted Amazon Prime is because it's come to the end of my 30-day free membership. I want to talk about two more things. I want to talk about the current campaign at the moment, what's happening in America. I want to tell you about my experience as a brown man living in the UK. It meant when I was younger, I used to constantly get harassed by security guards. Now, Crispin, it got so bad that I had to give up shoplifting. And speaking about shops, when Primark reopens, my mum says she's going to wear a face mask. Nothing to do with COVID-19. She's just a snob. She doesn't want anyone to know she shops there. And finally, about Black Lives Matter, I've had black and Asian friends who have been followed and harassed by the police. But I've got some great news. The police would never follow me because I've got dyspraxia, which affects my coordination, organisation and social skills. The police will never follow me because not even I know where I'm going.
Nice one.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Don. Patrick, have you got an update on your lockdown experience?
Yeah, hiya, Crispin. I'll follow on there from a few things there because the theme that you're talking about today is absolutely fantastic. You're talking about, and it's tackling about food poverty. We grew up in a household when we were poor when we were growing up. But let me tell you this: I've been living with my partner who is a vegan. And she's been a vegan most of her life. So we've never had any food in this house for the last, 10 years. I mean, it's literally, the only thing that she brings in is, vegans eat this thing called tofu. Now, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this. I wasn't. But tofu is a thing that's made out of water and hope. And you've got to hope that it doesn't taste like what it looks like because it just looks ridiculous. It's just, when we were growing up, it was, I remember because my family, I've mentioned before, they're Irish and Iranian, and my mum Iranian, all the family of that. And we, particularly as a kid, I remember we didn't have much money and stuff. So, but we would still do a lot of things like the Ramadan, which would, it's where you save money for a month. And I remember some years we would do Ramadan for about 6 months, 7 months. And then we do Lent, because my dad's Irish, and we would just give up food for about 40 days. So these were some of the ways of tackling it, and it was ridiculous. One of the things I want to touch on very quickly as well, and Don made a great point about it as well, about what's been happening recently in America and in the UK and stuff, was, again, I told you about the protest. We went to the peaceful protest on Wednesday. And it is so funny because you're watching stuff online, and even the last few days, you've still got comments. There was one person who was trolling, who was saying this thing like, because we'd gone to the protest and people had gone, they said, this guy gone, you're a moron for going to these peaceful protests, for doing all this, to going out there. But then at the same time, when I looked at his timeline, he'd gone to Bournemouth Beach. And he was like putting things like, so it's like, you're a moron if you go to a peaceful protest, but if you go to Bournemouth Beach, you're a legend. And I think this is what people don't realise about your principles. And I understand, obviously during this epidemic, there's loads of issues on, not just the food poverty, but obviously the coronavirus. But I understand that, look, we went to this peaceful protest on Wednesday. We did wear a face mask. We had all this sort of, the protection hand sanitizer. But people were saying to me, how could you still go out to a public gathering like that during this time? And I explained to people, to family and friends, I said, listen, I'm following the government's advice. I'm following their guidelines. I took Dominic Cummings' advice. I went to Hyde Park to the protest, and I just went to check my eyesight. I walked there. It was an 8-mile round trip. It was all right and fantastic. It wasn't a problem. One of the other things I want to just mention quickly, because I know you're probably running out of time, is this. I don't know if you saw this, everyone's been panicking about the vaccines and what's going on with Corona. There was a story, right, at the start of the week, I don't know if you saw it, a bloke that runs a mole catching company invested £350,000 into a Corona testing company, which have almost got a breakthrough. And he has made, in this last week, £1.9 million, just under £2 million. And I was like, hang on, who during these times has got £350,000 knocking about that they're looking to invest in something? I mean, and also he's a mole catcher. I didn't even know that was a job. I mean, is he living in Wind in the Willows? I mean, who's ringing him up? Like Toad and Ratty? And I was thinking, we're living in a time of abject poverty where people are struggling. If you're not furloughed, people are trying to get universal credit. People haven't got a proper job. And I'm thinking, which town and cities are overrun with moles? I've never switched the news on and they said, you know, corona deaths, there's another 300 today. And also, Manchester got ransacked by 600 moles, creating havoc. I'm sending mole Judge Dredd. I'm panicking. I'm thinking, I've been doing the wrong thing in my life. You know what I mean? I think I'm going to set up a mole catching business because this is the most lucrative business. If you've got £350,000 just banging about where you want to invest in companies, I mean, how expensive is it to catch? Who's paying you this sort of money? I mean, how are you catching moles? Are moles this fussy that you have to like put Demonte diamonds out and you've got to lure them in the house? I've got some gold sovereigns. Come in, mate. And then this is the biggest thing. And I thought, you know, I've got a feeling, I'm not an expert on this. There might be people on here who do a lot of gardening, or, you know, if you talk about food today, they might have the allotments and stuff, and you might have problem with moles. But I've got a feeling this is some sort of scam, that this bloke is literally, he's got his staff or he's got his mate dressing up in a big mole outfit, and they're just hiding in gardens. Right? And they're literally creaming money off people just to take this money. And then there must be some sort of Alcatraz-style prison somewhere where we're sending these moles once we've caught them. And this is the problem. Once you catch a mole and prison it, of course it's going to get out. That's all they do, is they just keep digging. You're just wasting your money. I mean, I don't understand. This is how we could end food poverty. We all set up a mole catching business. We'll all be making like 350 grand a week and invest it back into society. This is the thing. So that's my 5 pence for the week.
Thank you, Patrick.
That's my soapbox.
Susie.
Hello.
You've got your hair in different.
I've just put a thing on. I've just been crying for half an hour, so I'm trying to pull myself together.
You've just been crying because we're watching the show.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Sorry. Anyway, I should have watched Long Lost Family.
Coming on. Oh, sorry about that.
That's right. I was going to bail, but I didn't want to let you down, and also I've got a record of being on every show, so I'm staying. So
yeah.
I think I've been a bit hormonal lately, and that just tipped me off because I got really angry with a bloke on Tipping Point yesterday. So I think I was due a tactical cry. Did you know the other day it was Devon Day?
Devon Day? Devon Day.
It was actual Devon Day. We were celebrating Devon, and an abomination has appeared. I don't know if you know about the jam first, cream tea debate. But Devonians put the cream on and then the jam, and Cornish put the jam on then the cream. But Marks and Spencer's have brought out a jam and cream combo, which is an abomination. Please don't buy it. They think they're going to put an end to the centuries, I don't know if it's centuries, of debate, but it's horrific. But I've got a top tip. If you like a cream tea, if you've got the little Yorkshire puddings, the mini frozen ones, you can put cream and jam in it, and it's absolutely amazing. But you have to eat it straight away because it goes soggy. But I love your friend. I told her I wasn't feeling great, and she popped around today, and she's brought me this amazing present. She's brought me these little yoga cards because she knows I'm trying to get back into my yoga, and it's 52 cards, and each one has got a position. And I thought that might be fun as a drinking game, just have a drink in a position. But I don't know what my friend's obsession with positions is, because she's the same friend that brought me these cards back from Greece. Say before you all start thinking less of me, it's still in the cellophane. I haven't opened it yet. I'm waiting for a rainy day or when the internet goes down. But I have been trying to get back into my yoga, and I did it the other day, and my mum some strange noises. Jane, I think, well, she's fed up with me. I think she would knock me out, to be honest. But she heard strange noises, came in and took this photo of me. So I've been trying. I left it long enough. If anyone wants to take a screenshot, you're welcome. Whatever gets you through. But I had to buy these little like foot gloves because my toes were. I was slipping all over the mat. So I bought these little weird little. Isn't that weird for my toes? but it feels really nice. And I've been getting quite bendy actually, and because it was Devon Day the other day, I just want to share with you one of the local landmarks in Plymouth. We've got the Plymouth Theatre Royal, which is a great theatre, and they put this big statue outside called Messenger, and this is the size of the statue. This is life size, right? And it was based on an athlete, so she's in that sort of position. But I think it kind of represents me when I've dropped my lip balm on the floor and I'm trying to get it without my tights rolling down. But yeah, I've been trying to do the whole yoga, getting myself back, because at some point I will be wearing outside clothes again. Don't know when it's going to be, but anyway, it's always nice to see your lovely faces. And
I'm sorry that you got upset, and
that's okay. I think I needed a cry, and
well, thank you, Susie.
It's just been, the last few days, it's just been awful. Everything I've read and seen, and I had to put my phone away yesterday. I just, but thank you for this, because it's always nice to see your faces, and it always makes me feel better. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Susie. Just before we bring in. Before we end the show with Rob, I just wanted to say something, because Jeremy's still here before he goes. I just wanted to say, in fact, I'm going to just unmute Jeremy. Have I done it? Yeah.
Yep.
Jeremy, what we're planning to do on Wednesday is a tribute to Diane Abbott, because it's her 33rd anniversary of her being an MP. And I think it would be a wonderful show to have people paying tribute to her. Would you? I'm just propositioning you at this moment, because I've got you there. Wednesday evening, how's that going on your diary?
Listen, I could do it, no problem at all, because Diane has been an incredible icon for the party in many ways, and many people all over the country. And if we can find it somewhere, there's a picture taken in the House of Commons chamber of Tony Banks, the late great Tony Banks, the late great Bernie Grant wearing African costume, Diane looking very smart, and who was the scruffiest of them all? Uncle Jezza, who was standing there beside them all. Yeah, I'd be delighted to pay a tribute to her.
That's great. We're not going. We haven't told Diane.
No. Well, I hope she's not watching this today. Otherwise, she'll know about it.
I don't think she's watching.
But can everybody on the call be quiet and not tell her then?
Everyone has to keep quiet and not tell Diane that we're doing a show for her on Wednesday. But I think it would be great to do that.
Sarah's found the picture. Sarah Lowenthal has just gone up on the chat box. She's found the picture. So, Crispin, I'm sure Sarah will send it to you.
All right, well, I'll use that to promote it. And I'll say suggested by Jeremy as a promotion tool.
Might put her off.
All right, well, that's
well done, Crispin. It's a good idea.
I'll be in touch with you about that one. And Rob.
Right.
Rob,
yes, sorry.
Thank you for staying.
Oh, no, another just really moving and wonderful debate. Thank you. Well done, mate.
Well, I'm sorry about Susie's upset. Now,
it's always a pleasure to see Jeremy as well.
Would you be able to speak a bit about the song that we're going to play before I press play?
Yeah, it's always difficult to know what to do at the end of a programme, whether to do something cheery or whether to do something that relates to the subject. So this is I wrote this in 2018 about how homelessness has become like a big issue seller as part of the landscape, and then people who are homeless have become like almost invisible. You just, there they are, and they come out and they go away again, and they're sort of forgotten. And homelessness seems to me to be the absolute index of poverty. You're not even allowed to have shelter. So that's the most extreme form of poverty. So I thought it would suit this programme, which is about how that poverty is spreading throughout families in their homes and affecting children in schools, because we're now being denied access to food. It's also about how real life is not reflected. Someone said in one of the comments that the problem is the mainstream media, and that part of the problem is you have a media that doesn't reflect what life is like for most of us. Only there's only one Ken Loach now, and he's been kind of sidelined into national treasure. He's no longer working with the BBC. If you switch your television on, you switch your computer on, it's all white. Everything's glossy. Everybody's having a lovely time. Everybody's smiling. When you go out your front door, that's not true, is it? Everybody's doing the best they can, but there's people on the streets, homeless, people looking a bit bedraggled, people unable to feed their families. We have a media that, as your program's pointed out, a media that ignores something like the fact that there's a hunger epidemic about to hit significant portions of our population. So it's about the fact, I suppose the song's about the fact that so many of our lives are forgotten, that we've become forgotten and overlooked and part of a landscape of despair.
And the song's called Forget Me Nots.
Forget Me Nots, yeah.
So I'm just going to play your song.
You turn the big screen on, the girls are always beautiful, the men are wise and strong, the applause is astronomical, your sense of touch is gone, but you don't need it anyway. When you fall asleep, they sweep those dreams away, and the gardens grow, forget-me-nots, without number, without name. A sleeping bag, a cardboard box, left out in the rain. You turn the big screen on, the world is just so colourful, your heart begins to ache, so take some paracetamol. The radiant and young, they swipe those tears away. Buy a bigger screen, everything will be okay. The gardens grow, forget-me-nots, without number, without name. A sleeping bag, a cardboard box, left out in the rain. Turn the big screen on, the food is always beautiful. It must be you that's wrong, so hungry and invisible. They say they touched the sky, they say they won the war. The golden coach goes by, the winning goal gets scored. And still the gardens grow, forget-me-nots, without number, without name. A sleeping bag, a cardboard box, left out in the rain. And the gardens grow, forget-me-nots, without number, without name. A sleeping bag and a cardboard box, left out in the rain. We can't go on like this. We can't go on like this.
It's a very sad song. It's been a very sad show, I have to say. Thank you, Rob. You've probably got one of the best albums going with this Corona lockdown. There's got so many different songs you've produced, different types of songs. I mean, some being cheerful and chirpy, some being angry. That's very sad.
I'll do a cheerful one Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Well, you're going to do one for Diane?
I can do, yeah.
Can you do a special song for Diane? That'd be great if you could.
Yeah, Okay. Yeah.
I've never asked you before, so
I will get on with it.
okay.
Okay.
Right, so we've come to the end of the show. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for coming along. We can all thank Jeremy when I unmute you all, and thank you all, everyone who's spoken, and thank you to our performers. And it's been very sad, but it's good to be with other people, and that's part of what it's all about. So I'm going to unmute everyone now, and for about half a minute, you can say whatever you like. Often, obviously, it ends up with "Oh Jeremy Corbyn" being sung, but Rob did get the Internationale going a couple of weeks ago. So let's see what happens this time.
Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
It's Saturday afternoon, as ever. Contribution. It's Jeremy. It's Crispin.
Oh,
Great information.
Corbyn. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
Keep going. To your head.
Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
Icy criminals for reason and revolt now found, and at last ends the age of cant. Away with monkish superstitions, of our masses arise, arise. Will change forthwith penal conditions, and dust to win. Comrades come, last fight,
International. I can say thank you now. Keep the red flag flying.
Brentford fan.
People's flag
so much. Thank you,
is
Crispin.
red.
Another great
It's
show.
shrouded off, our martyr dead, and ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their hearts blood dried in every fold.